Hey team, welcome to a new phase of Long and Strong. You may have noticed in our last phase, which was flexible, we started doing these launch videos, and I'm going to continue that here for you guys with this next phase, which we're calling Workhorse. Workhorse. Reason for that is the focus for the next couple of weeks is going to be more on work capacity than it has been in the past. I think work capacity has always been a part of what we do. Typically, you'll see metcons at the end of sessions, or you might see a longer grind towards the end of the week. But it's been a while since we had a phase that was kind of dedicated to making work capacity a priority. And I think that's important because what I have often argued is that work capacity is sort of the third leg of the tactical athlete training tripod, if you will. You've got your strength work, you have your endurance work, and then you have that fuzzy kind of gray area in the middle, which I think is what we call work capacity. And it's interesting because what inspired this phase was a blog post that I put up on the website several years ago, I think 2022, 2023, which was called A Theoretical Guide to Work Capacity. And so if you actually go to the website, you read that post, you will see the framework, the multi-pace framework that I use to create this phase of training. The other thing that's really interesting about this phase and something that's got me really excited, quite frankly, is the flexibility of it. You would have seen this in the flexible phase where I gave the athletes quite a bit of choice in terms of how the sessions played out. We arranged them across the week in terms of volume and intensity, and then you sort of got to pick and choose how that week played out based on your schedule. This one, this workhorse phase is even more flexible from the perspective that on the work capacity days, you are actually choosing the movements. So I give you some constraints. I give you a menu of options and kind of some guidance on what I want that session to look like, but you get to build this session based on the movements that you want to put together. And that's fun for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, it allows you to have some control over what you're doing on a given day, which I think keeps things interesting. Secondly, from a programming standpoint, it actually makes programming a little bit simpler because you can keep the same construct for several weeks and just allow the athletes to kind of make adjustments based on how they're feeling. So if they like the particular setup that they created in that first week and they want to revisit it again the second week with some of the lessons that they learned, they can absolutely do that. Conversely, you can self-select harder or easier exercises based on your level of readiness. So there's, I think, a lot of goodness in this. I think where it might catch some folks off guard is just like this might actually be the first time they've ever had any sense of choice on a training program that they're following. So anyway, excited about it. We'll do a quick walkthrough just to give you an overview of kind of what we're looking at. So 6 days of training, as we kind of always have. There is an active recovery day, but it's a zone 2 active recovery day. So it's not just sort of a passive do whatever you want. It's a more strictly prescribed zone 2 session based off of the Maffetone formula, which is the 180 minus your age to get your zone 2. And I realize, and I say it in the session, it's not the most accurate by any means, but it is easy. It does allow us to kind of industrialize this zone 2 training, which I think is huge. So you have that day. As I always do, I've included some mobility, some yoga in there as well. I know most folks skip it. That's fine if you want to be one of those people, but I can tell you as somebody who does this myself, it's awesome, the benefits that you'll gain from that kind of work. So in addition to the zone 2 work, we also have 2 strength days, and the strength days are set up in a pretty interesting way if you've followed us for any length of time. So it's a little bit of a push-pull. The first one, we're hitting the deadlift and the bench press, and then on the second strength day, we're hitting the back squat and the weighted pull-up. So a little bit tighter with the constraints on those strength days, but really that's because strength isn't necessarily the priority for this phase. We are keeping the rep ranges a little bit more towards the lower end. So we're going to flirt in kind of the 1 to 4 rep range. And the other thing because we have such a large emphasis on work capacity for the remaining training days, we're just going to stick to some bodybuilding type stuff for accessory work at the end of those bigger lifts. So on paper, the strength days look a little bit longer, but the actual sections themselves should move relatively quickly. The other thing that I'm adding into these is a little bit experimental, but it's something that I've started to play around with and something that I want the long and strong community to start to play around with as well. And that's breath work, specifically prescribed breath work as part of the warm up. So whereas before we might jump into some mindless cardio and then do some kind of movement circuits, this time I'm going to specifically ask that folks hop on a bike or a rower. You could do it walking if you wanted to. I find that the bike is the easiest way to do this, but hop on a bike, start a clock, 2-second inhales, 3-second exhales, all through the nose for the entirety of that 5 minutes. Again, this is one of those things that I think a lot of people are going to skip just because it's weird and people don't like to do weird things. But there's a ton of research around the importance of breath work, around the importance of just oxygenation in general. And so I wanted to include this just to see if it had any kind of impact in how folks were feeling. So that's the strength stuff. Talked about the endurance stuff. Let's get to the meat of this, which is work capacity. So there's 3 work capacity sessions throughout the week. You can think of them as kind of short and hard, moderate and challenging, and then more like long and sustainable. And I'm pulling the format from these exclusively from that multi-pace work capacity article that I mentioned. I didn't want to get too weird with this. I wanted to keep it pretty straightforward so that folks could not only complete these sessions, but also learn a couple of lessons in terms of how they might program for themselves. So on the shorter, kind of faster days, and I'll just use some language from that blog post really quickly, we're working from what I called multi-pace 3 down across the phase to multi-pace 1. So you can think of this as kind of like a 3-minute work interval on the long end down towards like a 60-second work interval on the faster end. And those kind of work rest ratios are 1-to-1 generally, so kind of an aerobic work rest ratio, but you're doing several rounds of that. So in this first week, for example, you've got 6 rounds of 3 minutes of work, 2 minutes of rest. The second work capacity day gets into that kind of moderate duration, moderate intensity time frame. And in those cases, we're working from multi-pace 6, which is about 18 to 20 minutes of work, down to multi-pace 4, which is about 5 minutes of work. And because the work duration gets so much longer, the rest duration actually shrinks. So to give you guys an example from this first week, it's about 18 to 20 minutes of work, 10 minutes of rest, but you're only doing 2 blocks there. So 20 minutes of work, rest, another 20 minutes. And then the last one on Saturday, which is traditionally like a zone 2 day for us, we're actually going to do some prescribed work capacity on Saturdays. That's multi-pace 8 down to multi-pace 7. So a full hour or more of work with no rest, increasing in intensity down to about half an hour, done twice with 10 minutes of rest in between. So you can kind of see across the week, shorter, faster, harder, to kind of longer, more of a grind, more of a sustainable effort. Now, where this gets weird is the flexibility piece of it, right? So I'll zoom in really quickly to that first multi-pace day. This will be the Tuesday of that first week. So you've got 6 rounds, you got 3 minutes of work, 2 minutes of rest. Within that 3 minutes of work, you're going to do 10 calories of a machine of choice. You're going to do 8 reps of movement number 1, and then 6 reps of movement number 2. For movement number 1, I've given you a couple of options. You've got a double kettlebell clean and press, or you could do a dumbbell thruster, or you could do a dumbbell man maker. So some pretty like full body, but kettlebell / dumbbell unilateral movements. For movement number 2, we're getting into some body weight work. We've got either burpees, hand release push-ups, or burpee broad jumps. So you can see pretty quickly here, this session could look a lot of different ways. For example, you could do 10 calories on the rower, right into 8 double kettlebell clean and press, right into 6 burpees. You could do that over and over relatively quickly for 3 minutes, rest for 2 minutes, do it again, rest, do it again, etc. for 6 rounds. Same rules apply for the moderate duration, and same rules apply for the long duration. The change comes in how those sessions are structured. So in this case, I've given you specific reps. You choose the movements. In other sessions, I'm giving you more of like an ascending ladder. And again, you choose the movements. And then on the third one, I might give you some specific distances that I want you to cover. And then you can choose the accessory movements from within that. Generally, what you'll see is like couplet type stuff. Later on in the phase, we might get into some triplets or some longer circuits. But again, what I'm curious about with all of this, with the previous flexible session and now with this workhorse session, I'm curious about what happens with a large scale training program like this when you turn over autonomy to your athletes. And so I think some folks might see this and think, oh, he's like not actually programming, he's just telling us to choose what to do. And again, that's not really the case. I think when you assume that your athlete is just going to do whatever you tell them to do, you lose a bit of perspective around where that athlete is physically, mentally, etc. When I give you choice within the constraints that I create, I start to ask some very different questions. Like, how hard are you willing to push yourself? What state of mind are you in on a particular day? If you create a session that is more challenging than you thought, do you rise to that challenge or do you shy away from it? Like, do we see you repeating those types of efforts to try and better yourself, or do you say, that was too much, I think next time I want to go easier? So it's just a little bit more of a creative, maybe even like novel way of doing this. But again, what I want is to create a system where folks who join up are encouraged to explore and create and not necessarily just like told what to do. I think there's this misconception with training that it's just you being told what to do. And that's kind of boring, quite frankly. I personally find a lot more enjoyment out of following plans that allow me to, like, again, create, play, try new things. When I'm just told what to do every day for, 12 weeks, I tend to just drop off after a week or two. So again, quick overview. I'm actually going to publish a blog to go with this, so you'll have a little bit more of a write up that you can dive into. If this sounds like something you are interested in that you want to try, you can find all of the sign up information for Long and Strong on our website. And I will also encourage folks to go ahead and just sign up for the training bundle. For $10 more a month, you get obviously Long and Strong, but then you also get all of our standalone programs, including all the injury prevention stuff, and then any of the programs that we put out in the future as, standalone selection prep or what have you. So again, head to the website, sign up if you aren't already. If you are already on board, please let me know if you're enjoying this, if you absolutely hate it, if there's any changes that you want to see. I am genuinely looking forward to hearing how this works for you guys. Enjoy.